I was enjoying that.
Yeah. Who do we have DJing over there? I was vibing with that.
That's Molly Compton, private Molly Compton. I do have to say it's better than the Taylor Swift she was playing last week. Well, there was a reason we were playing Taylor Swift because she just dropped a new album with 10 different versions, like 8 different vinyl versions, different colors, different tracks. It's just insane. And there's a reason we played Migos was I think they're having some legal problems at the moment, which definitely feels like some next level stuff. But I wanted to throw that into the soup for us to talk about later.
Gotcha.
So, welcome to everybody joining us for our 12th MmX weekly event. Very lucky to have Eddie Sanders with us today, an attorney, label owner. What else are you, Eddie? Not that isn't enough.
I guess biker, good guy, educator,
and not available.
Yes, and soon to be married.
Yeah. Eddie's joined us down at the Milliken campus for our in-person events. We had remember we were talking about copyrights in that magical toy museum?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that burned to the ground.
Yeah, when you talked there, I was like devastated. That place had so many great artifacts in it.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was a loss to the Decatur community, that's for sure. So it's and you came down for MmX in person in 2019, and you were involved in MmX virtual in May of this year. So your family. So today we want to talk about some basic legal issues before we get into some discussions about a couple of things that are going on. Do you want to guide us through some of the basic pitfalls, do's and don'ts?
We can definitely start there. We can also look at, I think it's important also in the time we're in, the movement that's going on right now, where we see the civil unrest, we speak about the systematic racism and all that that's going on. We also, it's very important that during this conversation, when we're talking about copyrights, so we're going to be, might be pointing out certain situations where we've seen the system at work and how it's been to the detriment of other people. We can just quick story. I know Beyonce just put out that Black is King movie. It was an adaptation of The Lion King, so this is where that story is going. In that movie, The Lion King, we have the song "The Lion Sleeps Tonight." The "A Weem Away, A Weem Away." Okay, well, I think we're all familiar with that song. Beautiful song, made tons and tons of money, but for the wrong person. So if we do our history on that song, it was originally written by a man named Solomon Linda, a South African man who released it in 1939. Was not given credit for it, based upon the understanding of copyright law, having things filed and the appropriate credit given to his record. It was then made famous by this group called the Tokens, who is the one who reaps most of the benefits of this record when Disney takes over, licenses the record, does all that with it. So we're going to get into that conversation of copyright, but that's just a situation of like generational wealth that has been wiped away because someone didn't understand the value of what they had.
Right. And I think, and you're absolutely right. I think it's my, it's my inclination to start here and go there and there, which, right, and I, of course, there are a lot of issues happening right now that are exposed with the situation we're now in. And if you want to just dive into talking about that, then I'm happy about that too.
Well, I just wanted to kick it off with a story. I mean, we can get into, because I mean, when we're talking about intellectual property, when we talk about entertainment, it all revolves around those two formats of understanding copyright and understanding contracts. So we can't get into situations of copyright without giving some background as to what copyright is. Um,
And those stories of pretty basic exploitation by sleight of hand and lack of information um,
right.
uh, are manifest throughout the music business. I mean, um, Rolling Stones. Just take. I might. I'm not an expert on the Rolling Stones, but I think that they they were influenced by a lot of blues artists. I think at least what's his name, the guitarist, whatever he's. I don't know. I've forgotten the Rolling Stones guitarist name. At least he's. I think
This
they've
is
Keith Richards. Thank you, Mason. Oh, there you go. Yeah, yeah. I think
when we
the attempt to go back and uh, repair and pay artists that they felt influenced by. But that's fairly uncommon um, in the music business, and the situation that you're describing is way more common.
yeah, it's just direct copying and taking. So that is a larger conversation. Like, what do we do for artists? How do we go back and pay homage and some form of reparations to those artists that weren't compensated how they should have been before now? Um, there are so many horror stories from starting when music turned to the music with industry and we started seeing labels, and I even had to do my research to figure out how all this started, even with labels and understanding that they were the ones that understood distribution. They were the sound companies like our Sony's, our RTAs. They were making speakers. They were making sound equipment, so they understood how to make the digital, actual vinyl records and all that. So they became an ownership of the sound, but they had no idea how the creation of the sound, not understanding, no idea how the creation took place because they knew how to record it, but they didn't know how to actually create it. So it's been this disconnect for a long time between what we would say is the industry and the artist. And sometimes it is important to go back to see where the origins of it is so that when we're presented with the 2020 issue of, we say, QC and Migos, we have some backing on it to understand, okay, where did this come from? How did we get to this point where the industry works and operates in this manner?
And so, and I think it's important to have like honest discussions right now, right? We've known each other for a while, right?
Right.
South by Southwest 20, I don't
I want to say 2009 or 2010 easily.
know, something like that. But um, I I haven't, and I'm just speaking honestly now, as I am on my journey. Um, it never occurred to me to view that kind of exploitation in that light. I just, me, the music business has fucked and exploited everybody, you know. Um,
Right.
uh, but uh, but maybe not so much in equal measure, right?
Right. Right. Well, it's not just the exploitation of the copyright. When we talk about intellectual property, we got patents and trademarks in as well. And if we do our history, we can even take an example of a company like Jack Daniels. People love their whiskey, but their recipe was stolen from a former slave who created it. But since he didn't have the ability to file a patent, he has no ownership of that. So there are countless records that we can go back to and seeing how intellectual property has been manipulated by the person that understands the rules of it, not the actual creator of it.
Right, right. Wow, I didn't know the that story.
Yeah, so now there actually is a new brand paying homage to that guy. The Uncle Nearest brand is the new whiskey that pays homage to the guy and tells the story of what happened between him and Jack Daniels.
Wow. Okay.
So
Well, and I think I think it highlights something that we can do is, one, educate ourselves, and
Right.
two, do something that you and I try and do, which is educate anybody we come into contact with about not just the thing that we're talking about, but any broader issues, and sometimes more important issues.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and we've had this copyright conversation a lot, and I think now it is good to give a broader perspective. So when people are saying like, "Oh, I've heard what a sound recording is," I already know what the performing arts is, but how it works in the entire stream of commerce, the role that entertainment plays in this entire picture when it comes to education, housing, and when people speak of the movement and the issues that need to be addressed, the role entertainment plays, and also the narrative that is projected across the board. Um, Even from your earlier days, how the media projected punk music and punk rock, and how they tried to shape the narrative and say how evil you guys were, but actually, if you look at the research, how freeing and understanding of fuck the system you guys were. You know what I'm saying? So it was like music is super important, and if you're not in control of the music, i.e., if you've signed away all your rights to the music, you can't tell your story properly. So your narrative can now be changed and altered by the one that owns your company, that owns your content. So when we talk about contracts, we talk about copyright, understanding the value in what you're creating and making sure if you partner with somebody or if you sign a deal with somebody, making sure that you can still maintain your voice and your narrative.
I think that I had assumed, uh, going back, we both taught together at SAE here in Chicago years ago, starting years ago. And I think that at one point I considered not looking at contracts anymore, because I just thought, doesn't everybody know now what a minefield um, these contracts are? And then over the course of a semester, one, two, three students asked me to look at contracts, and the English term is gobsmacked. I was so surprised and horrified by the content of these contracts that we started to look at those contracts again. I think one example I saw was somebody was doing a deal, and I used to tell students, how long is the contract? And the answer is longer than you think.
Right.
And I'm like, it is. And students say, no, it's 3 years, and it says it's absolutely 3 years, and there's an option. I'm like, yeah, but it's their option. And then I'm like, you just haven't found the place in the contract that's going to screw you. And eventually they would realize that it's perpetuity, there's 3 extensions. And then one contract I looked at had an appendix A and B that had the artist's basically 5 years previous output. Their entire catalog was included as an addendum. I mean, it just seems the music business, except now here I am. Now I know about the Jack Daniels story.
Right.
uh, it just seems like the music business excels at this kind of. There's exploitation, but then there's exploitation whilst waving a Golden Globe Award or a Grammy or
Right.
hands,
Right.
which which
Or,
feels,
or car keys or something of that nature.
yeah,
Yeah.
which seems um, another level. Um,
Yeah.
because I think more so, feels like music is definitely a way out and a way up for anybody in
Right. Right.
that circumstance. But then those people are more susceptible to being manipulated. Yeah.
I mean, if you've never seen $40,000 in cash before, and somebody puts it in front of you and says, "This is yours if you sign with me," it's very intriguing to go with that, and not knowing that the man showing you that 40,000, he has already calculated that this deal is going to make him 4 million or $5 million. So understanding that when people come into this thing with the business, they do manipulate that situation. Because we think about most of our content creators and the great music that we get across the board comes from people in tough situations, people trying to get out of something and they're writing and it comes out of their soul and then we get these great records. We always look at that sophomore slump in artists, because that first album, there's so much pain in that thing. So
Yeah.
businesses and labels understand that and they can jump on that situation and sign them early or put them in a longer deal than they think is necessary. And it's not just major labels. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm bashing labels because a lot of the bad situations I see are from what we call these production contracts, where I find a kid, I say, okay, I'm going to help you along for the next 2 or 3 albums. Once you sign a deal with the major, I'm going to get cut from it, right? So they're signing people to label deals, but they have no label, they have no distribution. They're just acting as essentially a middleman to to get them to that label. So that's a bad. Those are kind of tough situations that you'll see. So another most a recent one, a guy was like, "Yeah, I'm signed to a 1 album deal." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. Let me see the paperwork." Um, it was 1 album, but within that album there were 2 options, 2 additional albums under that term, and then there were 2 more option terms total. So meaning 3 total terms, 3 albums in each term. So that's 9 albums total.
Yeah.
So just think of the mindfuck of like, okay, I'm 1 album. I think I'm signing for 1 album, and then it's actually 9 of them.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know, I'm,
it,
I'm glad that I can come into situations and read over things like, no, this is what's not going on. But there should be some type of basic trust and communication when you're dealing with the label and they say, I want to sign for 1 album. And they say, okay. But then they send you something that's 9 albums. It's like,
right. And not to make it worse, but I'll ask students, like, how long is a year? They're like, oh, then they'll look at me, well, it's 12 months. I'm like, nah, not in this contract, it isn't. A year is defined by the amount of time it takes you to deliver, let's say, 12 songs. I'm like, okay, that's a song a month. I'm like, yes, but how do you define deliver? I'm like, well,
right,
you take the, like, no, look at the contract. The song hasn't been delivered. It's not like a pizza. You dropped it off at the front desk and the label has it. The song has only been delivered when the label has accepted it.
right.
And it doesn't mean they've accepted, they've signed for it like FedEx. It means they've listened to it and they think it's as good as the hit that they signed you for. And if they don't accept it, you've got to go away and write another one.
Right.
So that 12-month period could actually be 2 years or 5 years if the label chooses to just keep you going round and round.
Yeah, I think that brings up a very good point. Whenever you're dealing with contracts and you see capitalized words within the deal and it's not capitalized to start a sentence, that capitalized word means that there is a different definition to that word, separate from what Webster's dictionary. So typically in the contract, delivery will be capitalized. So then you have to look through the deal to see what defines delivery. And like you said, it's not like Pizza Hut putting the pizza on the door. No, it's we have to accept it. It has to be commercially satisfactory, technically satisfactory. Um, Sometimes delivery has to reach a certain amount of sales before we accept it as something. There's all different types of options, but understanding what the definition of delivery. So even throughout the deal, you'll see capitalized words. And if you don't understand that word, you have to still look through the deal. Don't look in the dictionary. Look in that deal to see how that word is being
And even a release isn't a release. Like a free mixtape uh, doesn't.
defined. Doesn't count.
Yeah. Oh, oh.
Yeah,
So
and it works for everybody. There's the world's most popular artist right now has label situations where they don't accept his albums. A guy like Drake has put out tons and tons of albums, and The More Life album we can go back to. They called that a mixtape. If you're seeing this, it's too late. They consider that a mixtape. We're talking about albums that had Billboard hits on them that didn't satisfy delivery. So don't think it's just the smaller guys. It's everybody that gets caught up in this language of what is delivery, what's acceptable.
Is there, so you're a label owner. Um, is there a reason on the label side that you would defend that?
You don't want a situation where if I sign you to a 3 album deal, that tomorrow you turn around and give me 3 albums of ocean sounds and trees rustle. You know, you
That's
want to be
good, actually.
you just want to, from the label end, you just want to be able to make sure you get 3 albums of quality, and then you're able to space them out in an appropriate time. Where then, even if they are great albums, you don't want them still putting them out month after month. You still want to put together some 12-month calendar, things of that nature. So there is a reason to want to have that protection in there, but when it becomes when they use it to the advantage of shelving the artist and continuing to push things back, that's where the issue lies. So this will help segue into one of the things I like to do when it comes to contracts. If you are reviewing a contract and before you reach out to your attorney, what there should be 4 questions you should ask yourself. Remember, these 4 questions are always important. Answering these 4 questions will answer some of the sections in the agreement to make stuff. So that first question is, who am I signing with? When we answer that question, especially in music, who am I signing with, is who are the parties to this agreement, right? You understand label structures, and if you, others don't understand label structures, if you are signing to a label like Epic, Epic's parent company is Sony Music. Sony Music's parent company is Sony Entertainment. So when you are signing with Epic, you are signing also with those 3 entities. When money comes in, those 3 entities will be getting paid. So understanding all of the parties to your agreement are very important. Sometimes people will sign with subsidiaries of even Epic because oftentimes a popular artist will get the chance to do like a joint venture with the Epic. So there'll be the Epic will be the parent company of them. So it'll be all these different companies that are actually tied into your deal. So understanding who are the actual parties to your agreement, right? Next question you ask yourself is, what rights do I have to give up? So again, that's that. How many albums are you signed for? How many years are you signed for? Is it 10 albums? Is it 1 album? And then even though I'm signing for these album terms, what type of rights does the label own? Do they have exclusive rights to my catalog? Do they outright own my catalog? Is this what we call a licensing deal where they have the right to use for a period and then it comes back to me? What rights do I have to give up? Uh, Next question we're asking ourselves is, how do I get paid? I know it's a funny, I'm sorry, yeah, how do I get paid? But that's
Where's the
true in
money?
music.
Where's
Right.
the money?
What that go then that's getting into the conversation of what is our advance? Do we even have an advance? What does an advance mean? That recoupable amount. What is our percentage split? Is it 50-50, 37, whatever the case? Where is that percentage at? And then also very important, where is the accounting term? Right? Because they can tell you how much you're going to get paid, but if they don't tell you when you're going to get paid, you may not get paid. So that's very important. Understanding when those checks are coming. Is it going to be typically with labels? They do that every 6 months.
Yeah.
Companies like Empire, these new upstarts, they can pay you monthly. But just understanding when that check is coming is super important, and having some language in it that states
I had uh, I don't know if it was one of my favorite classes, but I went all the way across a really long whiteboard where we pulled out the accounting paragraph. In the first accounting period after the initial release, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, stop, what does that mean? And we put it on the board, so it's released the first accounting period after the release. Sometimes it will say the second accounting period. That's a year later, and then, so it's the period after that, Now it's 18 months. And then you'll see um, a, a, um, a return reserve, which is a throwback to physical distribution, where just in case a whole bunch of vinyl comes back that hasn't sold, they'll hold on to some money just in case. Labels will still do that with digital, but they'll hold on to that money for 2 more periods and then release the return reserve in 4 equal installments over the next 4 accounting periods. That's 2 years after, and and honestly, I wanted to set fire to the whiteboard, and you just got writing payments of 3, 4, 5 years down the line,
Right.
and um, just it makes my brain hurt to map that stuff out. But if you can't take the time to do that, you'll be on the wrong end of it.
Definitely. It's important when we're dealing with contracts also is to look at the lifespan of the deal. All right, it's a 3 album deal. They said we got to release an album every 2 years, so like 6 years, like legit mapping it out. Okay, that's from 2020 to 2026. Okay, how does the accounting work? And like you said, getting the whiteboard. So at least if you're in a bad deal, you understand how your deal works. That's the most important part of all this because there are going to be good deals, there are going to be bad deals. A deal is going to depend upon what are willing to take and what you're willing to give up and all that negotiation. But it's very important to understand how your deal is working. You know, don't go into the situation assuming that you're going to get paid this or your advance is going to cover all of your studio time, whatever the case may be. Really get into your deal, and then that's how you start building your team because you'll realize, okay, my manager doesn't really know accounting like that. Now it's time to find a business manager, find some type of accountant to handle this aspect. Okay, now I'm starting to get deals that are more than just split sheets. Now it's time for me to find an attorney to start handling these things for me. So throughout your time of trying to educate yourself, then that'll show when you need to actually help grow your team out. So yeah, and the last question I think you ask yourself is, how long does this last? So that gets back into the term uh, territory as well. Territory is a big thing, especially in publishing deals. Is this the United States only? Is this United States and UK? Is this the world? And then also we have the term the universe because we are dealing in digital space. So all of our satellites are not in the world; they're technically in the universe. So you want to make sure that, so the label wants to make sure they have ownership in the entire universe because I don't know how it works, but the zeros and ones go pinging around. They leave, come back. Whatever they do, they just want to make sure they have ownership in those situations.
Have you seen artists? Uh, there was a term in the 80s, there's a bidding war, you know, and but do you see that anymore where more than one person is interested in an artist? Because it seems to me like that's that that's
It's tough now because it's now the artists that we see get signed, they've been in some type of like production camp being groomed up by the label for a couple years. So then when they put out the big label hit, it's like, oh, look what we have as this star. Because the bidding war would happen because there were A&Rs actually outside going to shows, and there would be 3 or 4 A&Rs there from different labels being like, we need to sign that guy.
yeah,
Then they're getting to the bidding war. People aren't outside anymore. They're just looking through numbers and they're like, oh, he has 1 million streams. Let me send him an email. So a lot of bidding wars happen when deals are over. So that sophomore contract, you know, where the guy's already a budding star, and now all the labels are trying to go after him. But you don't see it as much now because A&Rs aren't really doing work to
right.
find talent.
I think uh, I think that so many artists that I talk to, they see a deal or an agent as the solution to their problem, and it can make your problems worse if there isn't a reason for someone to sign you. You're going to get a really bad deal. You don't have any leverage. You don't have any negotiating.
You
It,
have no value. So understanding that, great point, Mark. Contracts is an exchange of values. I'm giving this value in exchange for your value over here, and we're going to use each other's value. If I don't have any value to give you, what you're going to get in return is going to be horrible. So understand, like, okay, let me get my apples up before I go over here and try and trade with this farmer. Like, so have some value in that catalog or even your online presence. Just something about you to have some value,
yeah,
not just one or two records before you feel like the need to sign.
I, I love the idea of an artist releasing something themselves digitally and physically and doing some shows so they can go, well, hold on a minute. If I play to 200 people, 35 people are buying this whatever vinyl or a t-shirt, and there's that money. It at least gives you a frame of reference to look at what a label might be offering you for a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 year period and go, hold on a minute, man. If I jump in a vehicle and if I bust my ass, I could make this in 6 months. Why would I give up all of this to what am I getting? And that's a legitimate question to ask.
Right. You can, so you'll be able to scale, like you said, scale your business out and see how it really runs. I think that's important too to understand when it comes to signing with labels, having your own operation set up and understand who your fans are, understand how much your fans are willing to spend on you. Where are your fans? Like having that team around you, knowing how to tour, knowing how to release music. Because when you sign with the label's not going to come in and say, "Here's the recipe." They're going to say, "They're going to say, okay, deal's done. We're going to need that album soon." They may assist with finding you bigger producers or moving you to LA or Miami for a cool recording studio space, whatever the case may be. But they're going to say, okay, give me the album. So you have to have already a game plan. You already have to have a scaled out business before you start messing with these labels. So it helps you for when the label, like you said, when the label tries to offer you, oh, we're going to give you $1 million for this album. You can say in your head, wait, I was making 10,000 a month doing smaller shows. If I just double up by myself, I can be X, Y, Z. No, you're gonna have to give me 3 million if you want something.
Yeah.
You know, that's understanding your value and how much power you have in your content. You know, but you can only get to that point unless you've done the groundwork yourself. You know, so you and your manager really getting out there and looking at the numbers, understanding your fans, doing all that before signing, put you in a much stronger position.
Are there are there more people that you deal with who get that, or are there still people who think the music business is magic?
Uh, a lot of I have great clients. They're very educated on this, and that's on them being how intelligent they are, but also kudos to myself is trying to keep them informed on things.
Yeah.
But there are more people that understand you have to have your business set up before going to the uh, there are only a couple like that will see the glitz and glamour and think that's what they want. But the majority of the clients that I work with, I mean, a lot of my clients are producers anyway, so they're behind the scenes type guys that are just like, hey, I don't want all that hoopla. When is my check coming? And how often does my publishing come in? So I don't run into too many of those, but there still has to be people that are doing that because the industry is still the industry, and they're able to bring people in under this assumption of fame and fortune.
So, any more tips for us? Any more things to watch out for?
Uh, Answering those four questions to yourself so you have a basic understanding of what that deal is. If you don't understand totally how that deal works, find yourself legal representation. There's nothing wrong with having a second set of eyes looking at something for you, even if it's them just reaching out to like, hey Martin, I know you're not a lawyer, but somebody said they want to offer me this. Talking to people that are educated in the music industry so that you just get a basic understanding of what and I hate this term, but we say that industry standard or whatever the case may be, just so you have some type of benchmark as far as like how much people are getting for shows, things of that nature. So you're not out here selling, uh, taking a bad deal because the norm is, let's say you're a DJ and this club is offering you $250 for the set. If you don't talk to other DJs and find out that typically everybody gets $1,000, you know,
Right.
you're doing yourself a disservice. So making sure if you're going to get into the music industry, the business of music, that you educate yourself on the business of it and start surrounding yourself with people that understand how this really operates and they're just not in it to look cool on Instagram or Twitter or something.
Right. There's a question in the Q&A from Sammy Doherty here, one of our students. Do
What
you
up, Sammy?
hey, do you think in the digital age there are reasons um, or a need for artists to sign with a label in the first place? That's a good question.
Definitely a good question. When it comes to the label, remember how we said we're talking about an exchange of value, an exchange of resources. So what the label is going to do is they're going to put you, if they really support you, they're going to put you up front. And up front means playlisting, that billboard in Times Square. They're going to put you places. They're going to put you in front of mass amounts of people. If they're behind you. So the push that you can get from a label is really good. Um, that upfront money, that advance. Sometimes that's very important to help fund projects. And if it works out properly, where you can receive your advance, recoup, and now you're still making money, then yeah. So I'm not, as much as I harp on how bad. I'm not gonna say how harp on how bad labels are. There are benefits to signing with them, but going back to that first question of what parties, who am I signing to? You have to understand the people you're getting into business with. It's not just the terms of the agreement being fair. Are you dealing with fair people? So if you're going to sign with the label, the same way I said, surround yourself with people that know of the industry. Talk to people that are also signed with that label. If you're going to go with Atlantic, find people that are signed with Atlantic. How is your relationship with Atlantic? How does the marketing department work? How's the A&R department? Because even though the deal says, hey, we got you for 3 albums, whatever, if they don't care about you, if they don't like you, it's going to be a tough situation.
Yeah.
If it's a good situation, we can reference one of the artists that I've done work with, and I've seen her trajectory of a Doja Cat. She signed to a major label, and I can say the benefit of being with that label helps push her and excel her in certain venues, just because they have the connections back.
It, I think it would be great to say, and of course it's problematic at the time when deals are being thrown around, but what are the 5 reasons I want to sign with this label? And just like, ooh, being signed, not being not signed anymore is not a good enough reason,
Right.
and it might create like, well, but this one person is amazing at the promotional part. Well, maybe they have a side gig where you can hire them to be an independent publicist. Maybe maybe they're providing that service to the label, or um, I don't know if back in my day in the 80s and 90s when I was in the majors, there was something called a key man clause. Does that stuff even exist anymore? Where you
We
say,
still we have them a lot in management deals.
yeah,
So if you sign with like a management company and you're like you sign with like say a Maverick, a really big management company, that manager that brought you in, you can have that key man clause to say, hey, if Martin leaves this company, I have the right to get out of here as well. You don't see it as much in label deals because A&Rs last every 2 or 3 months at these labels.
yeah.
So it's not like, oh, if this A&R leaves, I have the right to get out of this label. It's only typically in management deals that I see.
And but once again, the only way for you to get something like that is to have the leverage to negotiate that into your deal. Yeah.
Definitely,
Wow.
definitely. So yeah, so if you are gonna sign with that label or you're looking to do a label deal, build up your team first. Have yourself a manager, have yourself your own lawyer. Do not deal with the lawyer from the label. I just want you to just think about that conflict of interest. Don't use the lawyer recommended from the label because I'm telling you, that
Don't,
lawyer works with the label.
don't,
So
don't
have your
the lawyer that the label is paying for. I said, "Fuck that."
I don't know. Sounds like a little conflict to me. So having your own manager, your own lawyer, understanding how things work, um, even third party sources like understanding how to get playlisting on your own, how to get publicists on your own, so that you just know how things work. So when you start dealing with the label, you can understand if they're bullshitting you or not, or if they're actually working for you or not. Um, just understanding the nuances of those things will really help you out when starting to deal with bigger
So, so you spoke about conflict of interest. Um, I just saw something about the Migos situation. Uh,
companies. Yes,
they are now suing their attorney because of a conflict of interest. That's as far as I got. I just read that this
right.
morning.
So the attorney for the Migos is also the attorney for their management company called QC, right? So it wasn't just the negotiation of the deal, the signing the management deal, but it will be into situations like this. Okay, the Migos just got a branding deal with Sprite, right? According to the terms of the management agreement, the manager's going to get a percentage of that, and then the Migos get their cut, right? The lawyer is getting a cut from QC and also a cut from the Migos on that deal because hey, the lawyer's getting a percentage from the management company. So technically, he was double dipping on a lot of these type of deals where he was getting a percentage from the management company and a percentage from the Migos. And then it's a conflict of interest because who whose best interest is in mind when negotiating these things? Is he thinking about the overall success of QC or the overall success of the Migos? And typically it's going to be for QC because they're paying him more money, right? So he's not fully vested or giving his best attention to the Migos if he's operating for both of these people. It's no problem with him being QC's lawyer and helping the Migos on certain situations, but the Migos should have their own lawyer for their business operations. It shouldn't be shared amongst Migos, Little Baby, Cardi B, Lil Yachty, and everybody on QC has one lawyer because then he can't really uh, devote his best attention to all of it.
Right. And is that so? I know they're suing that attorney. I don't know if it's a he or a she, who that is, but is that what are the legal repercussions for the attorney in the case?
It,
Is that disbarment or
well, he will probably be called if they actually moving forward with that. He can be called in front of a disciplinary board. Um, you're not necessarily disbarment. Disbarment, you have to do something super drastic
okay?
to get to that point. But there are levels to it where you can be reprimanded, where they say you can't practice for 6 months, you can't practice for a year. There are levels to the disbarment. So they can bring them in front of a disciplinary board and say, did you disclose the conflict of interest? Yada, yada, yada. And then even if you disclose the conflict of interest, if it's too large, you have to just remove yourself.
Right.
You know, it's like going in and saying, okay, this divorce is happening. I'm going to be both you guys' lawyer. Here's the conflict of interest. No, that conflict is too large for you to even do that in the first place. So in some of these situations, he should have got separate legal representation or advised the Migos to say, hey, you guys should get another lawyer for this to look over. But he didn't do that because he wanted to maintain all the profits
Yeah,
for himself.
it says a lot right there that he didn't disclose it. I
Right.
I I had something where um, somebody who was in my band Pigface was everybody in Pigface is in another band, and I introduced that band to my attorney. He ended up representing myself, and so the band. I wanted to do an album with this person, and we both had the same lawyer. And it was like, well, I don't want to use another lawyer. Can't we use you? And my attorney's like, well, yeah, it's the conflict. And and we're like, yeah, but we're fine. It wasn't a heavy negotiation. He sent us both this paperwork that said he disclosed the situation. We knew, and we were okay with it. And then he had to send us another set of paperwork saying he hadn't exerted any force to have us sign the previous paperwork saying it was okay. And it was meticulously, yeah. And in retrospect, maybe we shouldn't have done it. But,
Yeah, I mean, in that situation where you guys are kind of friends and you could probably like work it out, that's cool. But he still had to protect himself because if your friend says, "Oh, well, we use Martin's lawyer for this. He shiced me out of his deal. I should have blah blah blah." Then that lawyer said, "Wait, wait, wait." Like, no. So in those situations, like, yeah, you can have a situation where it's like, "Oh, I know both these guys. They just want to do a simple contract. Okay, let's talk it out. We can work on it." As long as I still disclose my conflict. And then in that situation, that conflict wasn't that great. He had to say, you know what, I can't work on this.
and the other thing that I saw, Tonya Butler, who was at Berkeley, I think she's the department chair of music at Berkeley College now. She has a podcast, and she was. Do you still do your podcast, by the way?
Yeah, I sent a link to Molly, so hopefully we can post that.
Molly's amazing. Molly's over there, throwing it in.
So
She was talking about the Lady Antebellum name.
and then once they realize that there's already another Lady A, they proceed to sue her for the rights to her name.
Yeah, like what?
In solidarity with you guys, but I'm gonna have to sue you for that name. So I
However,
can. However, they could have went with Lady Ant. You know, they like
yeah.
it's just it was interesting how they moved in that situation. Because at first I'm like, oh great, change the name to Lady A. But wait, there's Lady A, and what are you gonna do with that? I mean, it would have been great for them to offer her some compensation for her name. You know, say if she's an artist that's not selling as much, not doing as well, do some cross promotions. You can do a lot more positive in that situation outside of the courts, than how they chose to handle the situation.
Has it been? I mean, she was on CNN. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to think that they hadn't thought this through. They were okay with it. And yeah, she was on CNN saying they're trying to take my name, and uh, yeah, is it still going on? Has it been
Well,
settled?
no, I don't think it's been resolved. I'll have to double check on that. But my last knowledge, they were still trying to figure this thing out. And it's like, from even if you do rectify and you take the name, like you've tarnished the name behind it by the actions that you've done. So
Yeah,
at this point, it's not a legal thing; it's a PR thing. So how are you going to rebrand yourself after this?
yeah, yeah. Good luck. It's a good time. We stand in solidarity, notwithstanding the foregoing. No,
Exactly.
so there's a couple of questions. I don't know if you can see the Q&A.
Uh, Let me see. I'm on the phone and I don't want to hit the wrong button and we lose everything. So
I'll read them to you. It's okay.
uh,
Um, I think we covered Abby's question about small artists. Would you recommend making a name for yourself? Yes. Um, have you worked with film studios on clearing songs for soundtracks? This is Mason. And what is the process like clearing songs for soundtracks?
I haven't worked with sound companies. I've represented artists in that situation. But if you are the film company, understanding that you're going to have to get clearance, if you're going to what we call a sync license, you're going to have to get clearance for both the composition and the sound recording. So in all music, every song that's recorded, there are two copyrights. You have the composition, which we call the performing arts, and you have the sound recording, or the i.e. the master. So the record labels typically own the master, and the publishing company owns the composition. So for that one song. So if you want to use that song in the movie, you have to reach out to the label and the publishing company. Typically, if you reach out to one, they'll give you the information to the other because they've already had to work together on that license. So it's called a seek license. And even though I haven't worked with the actual film companies, I've worked on the artist's behalf. So I understand how that situation is handled. And it's just a matter of reaching out to the labels and disclosing what your budget is, and then they'll tell you how much it'll cost for that record. Sync licenses isn't a standard rate or any type of statute in which you have to pay. It is all negotiated between you and the owner of the company.
I just came across a new company. It's not a new company. It's been around for a few years, called TrackLib, and it says it's a record store for licensing. So you go into their store with a subscription, and you can take anything on the bottom shelf. It's already pre-cleared. They've
Okay.
priced it or they made it. Um, and I think that's a very interesting step into the future. They just received a bunch of funding, so we're actually going to be talking to them in a couple of weeks' time just to see what exactly is happening there. Because it seems
And
like
if it's a little more streamless than working with a label, that's awesome. Like if you can go in there, because typically when you're doing that movie, you may have a specific song in mind, but it's typically a sound that you're going for, or a feel, or a mood that you're trying to capture at the time. So if it's a site where you can go through and you're like, man, this is a rainy day scene, we got to make you feel sad and somber, and you can find something that's already cleared and just pay that fee, man, that's going to be groundbreaking right
yeah, yeah. Oh, there's a follow-up question in the chat. Do live recordings unauthorized? Are you, Jimmy, are you saying like a bootleg? Like somebody?
there. Yeah, if you take somebody's live recording, so you want to, so I'm assuming like you're at like a Lollapalooza and you record somebody's set and then you try and use that set, you're still infringing upon their copyright. Um, if you play anybody's music without their permission, regardless of the nature in which you do it, it's copyright infringement. Uh, because there is still some value in you playing their music that comes to you. So yeah, even if you just record it unauthorized, you'll still be in
Um, well, okay, Mary Alice says, "What is the most common mistake that artists make when signing a contract?"
trouble. Looking at the money first, going straight to how much they're going to get, and not looking at the big picture of the contract. Um, so it's not just like one little point. It's just the overall approach to what am I getting myself into, and going in it with the mentality of that this is a quick fix situation, that this is something overnight that's just about to happen. Once I sign this, it's a star. It's I think it's that misconception is probably the biggest problem, not actually like any one point. It's the
Right.
mentality.
I, I would say, I mean, it's the same thing that you said. I would say not reading the contract. You know, what can I sign? I read an interview with, was it Little Yachty, who said, "I never signed the deal. I never read the contract."
Yeah. He said, I never read it, but I know I'm recouped. He's like, well, somebody just told you that? And he's like, what does that mean? Come on, man.
I,
Yeah.
I had a great example of label manipulation. With a student at SAE, I'm going back 3 or 4 years now. They handed me this horrifying contract to read through, and I'm like, just don't sign this deal. Whatever you do, don't sign this deal. I probably said, "Hey, get Eddie to have a look at it." Right? And and he said to me, "But they're flying me to Atlanta on Thursday." I'm like, yeah. What? And I looked up, it was $180 ticket on Southwest. I'm like, dude, don't get on the plane, because once you're in Atlanta, they'll take you out to a club, and I guarantee some star bigger than you who's affiliated with the label will be like, whoa, what are you doing here? What, just, yeah. It's sometimes it's the stuff outside of the contract that
Yeah.
can really be heavy as well. Um, Here's a question from Abby. If an artist produces or songwrites for themselves, do they need multiple contracts for the different roles they play in the making of the music?
So the artist creates all the music themselves
And produces it, yeah.
and produces it. Oh, no, I would just say just keep record on a split sheet of the stuff that you've done. If you're the only one, then it's not that daunting of a task to say I need to get agreements for all of this because you're the only agreement I would say to have with yourself is once you create your LLC and you create your business structure, signing yourself to that would be the only thing. And then after that, keeping a record, which would be your split sheet of all the songs that you've done so that you know for your own sake. But if you're not dealing with other people and negotiating other percentages with them, the necessity for multiple contracts isn't there.
Okay.
I threw a link to the split sheets in the chat.
Oh, okay. Molly
Oh, yeah.
just, amazing Molly just put a link to the split sheets that you have on your site.
Yeah.
Oh,
So on the site, it should be a copy of it. It's like a Google sheet. If you make a copy of that, then you'll be able to type into that Google sheet. So
and last question here from Molly Cook, and then I have a couple of things. What amount of leverage
where the value can go to the label. So it's not just a number of, oh, I need a million views over here, a million views over there. It's how well do I engage with my fans? How well do they communicate with me? Um, but if we are talking catalog based, let's make sure we have one or two projects on Spotify and Tidal that have strong numbers behind them. So when you're going to the label, that you can show, okay, I started last month with 200 monthly listeners. I put out this project. Now I'm at 1,000 monthly listeners. Every week I do this thing on IG, and every time I do this thing on IG, I bump up 500 monthly listeners on Spotify. So on those calculations, if you guys come in, we can take this to X, Y, and Z. So not just the number of people you have, but how well you work with the people, work with those numbers, and understanding how those numbers work for you.
Yeah, it's a different language, isn't it? I think the days
Yeah.
is I want to be left alone to play my bass. Like, okay, go and sit in the bass.
Yeah, there's only a couple like Kendrick Lamar is probably one of the only hip hop artists that can get away with putting an album out and then going back into hiding. Not even our Drakes, J. Cole's, Travis Scott's, all these big pop stars, the baby, little bit, they have to be out and they have to be engaging. It's like it's a new age where you can't just sit back and say, I'm just strictly a musician. It's like, and if and maybe it doesn't have to be them per se, but their brand and their team is presenting enough content and keeping their name out there.
Yeah. Well, so thanks. It's been a while. Well, I was going to say it's been a while since I see you, but I saw you a few weeks ago.
Right, right.
But so, just to wrap this up, just kind of as you began talking about the current climate that we're in, you know, so Emily White, she wrote a book about internships and kind of a inspirational figure. She worked with Amanda Palmer. she's working to flip a few states using music and artists to encourage people to vote. And it's data driven and so super smart. And so I said to Emily, hey, are there any ways you can think of that I could help right now in this climate? She said, yeah, make a donation to Black Kids Swim. I'm like, okay, well, that it seemed to come out of left field to me. Like, okay, I wasn't going to. Well, I was going to say I wasn't going to question it, but I did kind of question it. I'm like, yeah, okay, why? And she said, well, because of Jim Crow laws and access to public pools, Black kids are more likely to drown now because of that. I'm like, fuck, right? So,
Yeah.
so as I continue my stumbling way through this, um, are, are there any ways that we can help things that you're involved with, or
Uh, Two organizations that I work closely with. We have Equity and Transformation, and also De La Creme Scholars. Right now, specifically with De La Creme Scholars, we do a weekly grocery run. So when protesting first happened and we ran into those situations of the rioting that took place, a lot of the grocery stores on the south side were destroyed to the point where nobody had access to these stores. So De La Creme Scholars came in and just started doing weekly trips. If you All you had to do was reach out, you say I need groceries, we're coming back to groceries. So it wasn't a thing of, oh, you got to apply for this and all that. So even though Dale Come started as a scholarship program, we just tapped into, I'm going to say we because I've helped with them, but it's actually artist by the name of FemDot that handles this. Tapped into the resources we had and was able to get enough donations where we were able to feed hundreds of people with supplies and donations. Equity and Transformation is another nonprofit. My good friend Richard Wallace, has put together. Um, and his is just understanding the economic struggles that take place within the community and shining light on that, and not just looking at it from a political ends, but how do we economically empower people of color. So those are two organizations that I'm working with, and just on your own, if it's just starting to educate yourself on entertainment to this point. I tell a lot of people, I spoke about it on the podcast the other day that'll be coming out soon. It's a movie called The Birth of a Nation. Came out in 1915. It was the first movie ever shown in the White House. In that movie, it depicts African Americans who are played by white people in blackface as unintelligent, um, savage animals, sexually aggressive towards white women, and violent. And the hero in that movie was a Klansman, right? So the white Ku Klux Klan man rode in on his white horse with his white robe and saved the day. That was a critically acclaimed film that came out and was the first film shown in the White House. So that just shows the start of this narrative that of how the black man and black woman are projected on TV. So when you see uh, all the gangster movies and you see why they project the black woman as violent, it started from this earlier history of how cinema presented us. So going back a little bit to understand the history of not just slavery, but how America was created and the truth of how America was created, you'll start seeing a lot of uh, resemblance of current day.
I mean, so you know, I'm glad we're on this fucking journey.
Yeah, it's definitely good, to actually move forward with things and people becoming aware of what's going on and we're not staying stagnant.
Right.
So
Well, thanks, Eddie. Molly put the De La Creme Scholars link um, and a book, White Fragility. Have you been reading that, Paul?
It's a good place to start, and the link to 13. It's all about the industrial complex.
Molly also put a link to 13. In
Is
there.
that the Ava DuVernay film?
Yeah. The documentary.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super dope. So yeah, thank you, Martin, for having me. It's always great when we have our discussions. So awesome. I can't see the numbers of who's still in the chat and who's here, but thank you guys
20 people.
for being here. Oh, awesome. Thank you guys for hanging out and staying this whole time. Uh, I think contact information for me should be provided in some of it. So yeah, if you guys have additional questions or you need my services or whatever the case may be, I'm not selling myself right now, but if you need me, I'm here.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks a lot, Eddie. Thanks for doing this. And I'm going to call you for something else at some point.
right.
All
I'll be here.
right. Thanks, man.
All right, guys. Hey, everybody be safe and
Thanks, Eddie.
wear masks.
See ya.